Should you always believe the victim? My sister claimed our neighbor harassed her to gain sympathy and control our family. My parents rallied to her defense, and they shunned me for doubting her story. So I secretly gathered evidence of her lies, shared it with our community board, convinced her best friend to expose her at a neighborhood meeting, hired a private investigator to uncover her motives, and revealed the truth, only to lose my family's love and live with the guilt of breaking our home. My sister Olivia learned early how tears turned into power. A scraped knee on the pavement became a full opera, ending only when Mom canceled her plans to provide undivided attention. A forgotten homework assignment morphed into accusations of a mean teacher, mobilizing my parents into defense mode until the teacher, weary, backed down. Olivia absorbed the lesson. Victimhood granted sympathy, attention, and control. My parents reinforced it, rushing to soothe, to shield, to believe. My older brother Mark learned avoidance. I learned to watch, a silent cataloger of inconsistencies. Olivia would claim illness, receive pampering, then miraculously recover the moment the desired outcome, a skipped chore, a canceled family outing she dreaded, was achieved. She'd whisper secrets, positioning herself as a loyal friend betrayed, watching social circles shift based on her carefully crafted narratives. Each incident went into my mental file, marked Olivia's reality versus actual reality. Questioning her version was futile, branded as jealousy or unkindness by my mother. Just support your sister Alex became a common refrain. Supporting Olivia meant accepting her fiction. High school sharpened Olivia's skills. The stakes got higher than missed chores. Friendships imploded under the weight of her manufactured dramas. Reputations were subtly tarnished by her whispers. She navigated social currents like a shark, leaving wakes of confusion and hurt while maintaining an air of wounded innocence. My parents remained her staunchest defenders, their belief unwavering. They saw a sensitive soul navigating a cruel world. I saw calculated campaigns for control, fueled by an insatiable need to be the center of every narrative. My silence grew heavier, the gap between the family's accepted reality and my observed truth widening into a chasm. Expressing doubt, even mildly, resulted in icy disapproval and lectures on family loyalty. It was easier, safer to just watch, until the day silence was no longer an option. The event that finally shattered my silence, forcing my hand, occurred without warning on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday evening. Olivia had taken Rusty, our aging golden retriever, for his usual after-dinner walk around the block. She returned much later than expected, bursting through the front door not with the usual casual greeting, but in a state of apparent consuming terror. Her face was chalk white beneath her makeup, tear tracks already carving paths down her cheeks, her breathing shallow and ragged. She half stumbled, half ran towards Mom, who was reading in the kitchen nook. Olivia physically collapsed against her, shaking violently, unable to form coherent sentences at first. Fragmented phrases tumbled out between choked gasps. "Mr. Henderson," she managed, her voice trembling. "Down by the mailboxes. He said things. Awful things." She buried her face against Mom's shoulder, her body racked with convulsive sobs. "Mr. Henderson. Arthur Henderson, our neighbor for my entire life. A widower in his late 70s, known primarily in the neighborhood for his meticulously kept prize-winning roses and his generally quiet, unobtrusive demeanor. He exchanged polite, brief greetings if encountered on the street, occasionally grumbled mildly if neighborhood kids cut across his perfect lawn, but mostly kept to himself since his wife passed years prior. The idea of him verbally harassing anyone, let alone 17-year-old Olivia, felt fundamentally wrong, discordant, like accusing a librarian of starting a bar fight. It clashed violently with decades of passive observation, with the established, quiet rhythm of our suburban street. Mom reacted instantaneously, her book forgotten as she pulled Olivia into a fierce, protective hug, her own face registering immediate shock and maternal alarm. Dad, drawn from his study by the commotion, appeared in the kitchen doorway within seconds, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to a tight-lipped, protective anger as he absorbed the scene. Olivia, clinging to Mom as if for life, elaborated haltingly on the alleged encounter. Henderson had cornered her, she claimed, near the community mailboxes at the end of our block as dusk was falling. He had said suggestive things, blocked her path when she tried to leave, made her feel scared, threatened. When pressed by Dad, his voice low and urgent for specifics. What exactly did he say? Did he touch her? Did he threaten her physically? Her answers remained frustratingly vague. She couldn't recall the precise words, only the creepy feeling, the look in his eyes, the fear that had paralyzed her. Her physical manifestation of fear seemed authentic. The trembling was real, the tears copious. Yet the narrative itself felt thin, incomplete, crafted. My internal alarm system, honed over years of observing Olivia's performances in similar, albeit lower-stakes situations, began to clang loudly, insistently. Adding significantly to my unease was the unavoidable context. Just the previous day, Monday evening, Olivia and Dad had engaged in a loud, protracted argument that had ended with Olivia storming off in tears after he had categorically refused her increasingly insistent demand for a specific, expensive model of convertible for her upcoming 17th birthday. The timing of this sudden, terrifying encounter with Mr. Henderson felt disturbingly, suspiciously opportune. Later that evening, after Olivia had been ministered to with warm milk, endless soothing words, and installed safely in her bedroom, with Mom sitting vigil beside her bed, refusing to leave her side, Dad paced the living room like a caged predator. His face was set in grim, determined lines. The police needed to be called, he stated flatly, his voice tight with controlled rage. A formal report needed to be filed immediately. Henderson had to be confronted, held accountable for his actions, made an example of. Mom, joining him after Olivia finally drifted off, argued for a different, perhaps more socially strategic approach. While agreeing Henderson's actions actions were reprehensible, involving the police immediately could be messy, potentially leading to unwanted public scrutiny or even skepticism if Olivia couldn't provide exact quotes. Talk to the community board president first, she urged. Mr. Davies, warn key neighbors discreetly, especially those with teenage daughters. Protect the community's vulnerable residents. Build a consensus about Henderson's dangerousness without necessarily triggering a formal, unpredictable police investigation right away. Their discussion, intense and focused, centered entirely on the method of dealing with Henderson's presumed guilt, not the validity, the truth, of the accusation itself. His culpability was taken as an unshakable fact. Olivia's story, despite its vagueness, was accepted as absolute, unvarnished truth. Watching them, listening to their unquestioning conviction, I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, settling deep in my gut. The injustice felt too stark, the potential consequences for Mr. Henderson too severe. I had to speak, regardless of the personal cost. Gathering my courage, interrupting their strategic planning, my voice felt rusty, hesitant. I voiced my hesitation carefully, suggesting that perhaps, given the lack of specific details and Mr. Henderson's long history as a quiet neighbor, we should be absolutely certain about exactly what transpired before taking irreversible steps that could destroy his life. The shift in the room was instantaneous, chilling. Their shared focus snapped away from Henderson, redirecting towards me with laser intensity. Mom's expression turned cold, her eyes narrowing. What precisely was I implying? Her voice was dangerously quiet, laced with disbelief. I tried to articulate my unease. Olivia's history of exaggeration, the convenient timing after the car argument, the vagueness of the accusation itself. Henderson's established character over many years. Dad's face flushed with anger. Was I defending Henderson? Was I, his voice rising sharply now, actually accusing my own sister, his distraught, victimized daughter, of lying after she'd endured such an ordeal? No, I protested. Not accusing her directly, just advocating for caution, for thoroughness, for certainty, before potentially ruining an elderly man's life and reputation based on an incomplete account. Mom shook her head slowly, a look of profound disappointment mixed with pity settling on her features. How could I be so callous, so lacking in empathy? My sister comes home terrified, victimized, and my first thought, my first instinct, is to protect the man who allegedly did this. I countered weakly that his guilt wasn't proven, that we didn't know for sure what happened. Dad cut me off sharply, his voice dropping again to a low, menacing growl that signaled the end of the discussion. They knew their daughter, he asserted, his conviction absolute. They believed her. End of story. My support, my silent acquiescence, was expected. My doubts were unwelcome, disloyal, and were to be kept strictly to myself. The line had been irrevocably drawn. Family loyalty demanded unquestioning belief in Olivia, the designated victim. Objective truth was secondary, irrelevant even. The emotional temperature in the house plummeted immediately, settling into a deep freeze directed solely at me. My parents' interactions became minimal, purely functional, stripped bare of any residual warmth or casualness. Conversations ceased abruptly when I entered a room. Questions were answered with curt, monosyllabic replies. Olivia, when forced to interact, regarded me with either exaggerated, tearful displays of hurt. How could you doubt me, Alex? After what he did, or a frosty, condemning silence that communicated utter betrayal. Mark, ever the barometer of parental approval and seeking the path of least resistance, mirrored their behavior flawlessly, avoiding eye contact, finding sudden, urgent tasks elsewhere if I approached, and generally treating me like a contaminant within the family unit. The house, already operating under layers of unspoken tension and performative harmony, now felt actively hostile towards me. I was the dissenter, the traitor in their midst, the one who had dared to question the official narrative of Olivia's victimhood. This deliberate ostracization, clearly intended to pressure me into recanting my doubts and offering penitent support, had the opposite effect. It solidified my conviction that Olivia was lying, and that my family's blind faith, their refusal to even consider alternatives, was not just misguided but profoundly dangerous. I felt a growing, urgent sense of responsibility towards Mr. Henderson, an innocent man unwittingly caught in the complex, destructive crosshairs of Olivia's manipulative drama. If my family refused to seek the truth, if they were determined to proceed based on a fabrication, then I had to uncover the facts myself. Not necessarily for them, I suspected they were beyond reach of evidence by now, but for Mr. Henderson, and for the sake of the objective truth itself. My secret investigation began methodically, focusing first on the most basic element, opportunity. Olivia's claim placed the incident around 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, near the shared mailboxes situated at the end of our block. I knew from years of casual observation and neighborhood chatter that Mr. Henderson was a dedicated volunteer at the town library every Tuesday afternoon. On Wednesday, manufacturing a need for research materials for a non-existent school project, I went to the library. My target was Mrs. Gable, a well-meaning neighbor known for her extensive involvement in various town activities, including library volunteering. Steering the conversation casually towards the library's operations and volunteer schedules, I inquired about Tuesday shifts. Mrs. Gable, happy to chat, readily confirmed that she and Mr. Henderson had both worked their regular shifts the previous day, Tuesday. She specifically recalled needing his assistance, shelving a large donation of heavy history books in the archives section, a task that occupied them both from roughly 4:30 p.m. until well after the library's official closing time at 6 p.m. She even remembered joking with him about missing the start of the evening news because they finished late. To be absolutely certain, eliminating any possibility of misremembering, I later found an opportunity, when the main desk was momentarily unattended, to discreetly view the official volunteer logbook left open on the counter. Henderson's signature was clearly visible, indicating he had signed out at precisely 6:15 p.m. on Tuesday. He physically could not have been at the community mailboxes, a 15-minute walk away, harassing Olivia at 5:30 p.m. His alibi was concrete, verifiable. Next, I focused intensely on documenting Olivia's behavior, observing her closely during moments when she thought she wasn't being watched, comparing her private actions with her public performance. The contrast was stark and illuminating. Publicly, she fully embraced the role of the fragile, traumatized victim. She spoke in hushed, trembling tones to the stream of concerned neighbors who called or stopped by with casseroles and condolences. She accepted deliveries of flowers and sympathy cards with meticulously performed gratitude, often dabbing at dry eyes. She allowed Mom to fuss over her constantly, reinforcing the image of needing constant care and protection. She posted vague but emotionally charged messages on her social media accounts about feeling unsafe in her own neighborhood and finding strength in adversity, garnering hundreds of supportive comments. Privately, however, the performance ceased the moment the audience departed. I witnessed her scrolling through online fashion boutiques, humming cheerfully to herself, just minutes after ending a tearful phone call recounting her ordeal to a concerned aunt. I overheard her laughing loudly and animatedly on the phone with her best friend, Chloe, discussing detailed plans for an upcoming weekend party and dissecting intricate social gossip, her voice completely normal and energized. When Dad, clearly softened by the fabricated ordeal and likely feeling guilty about the preceding car argument, tentatively reopened the discussion about transportation, Olivia skillfully pivoted from fragile victim to shrewd negotiator, suddenly articulate, focused, and demanding specific features for the car she now clearly expected as compensation for her trauma. The rapid, seamless shifts between these two personas felt jarringly inconsistent with the behavior of someone experiencing genuine fear and trauma. While the established alibi and the documented behavioral inconsistencies strongly reinforced my conviction, I knew I needed irrefutable proof of the lie itself to have any hope of countering my family's narrative or protecting Mr. Henderson effectively. Olivia guarded her phone like a fortress, but her laptop discipline remained occasionally lax, especially when she felt secure within the house. The opportunity arose one Saturday afternoon. Olivia was upstairs, supposedly taking a nap after claiming to feel overwhelmed, leaving her laptop open and logged in on the kitchen table. My heart pounded against my ribs, a sickening mixture of guilt over the violation of privacy and the urgent need for truth churning within me. I quietly navigated to her messaging application history, my fingers fumbling slightly on the trackpad, scanning frantically for conversations with Chloe around the time of the incident. The incriminating exchanges leaped off the screen, stark and undeniable. Scrolling back to Monday afternoon, the day before the alleged incident, Olivia's string of furious texts about Dad's refusal regarding the convertible, filled with entitlement and frustration. Chloe offering standard teenage commiseration. Then Olivia's pivotal message: he's treating me like a child. I need to make him see I'm vulnerable, that I need looking after. Needs a shock to the system. Gotta make him worry. Big time. Got a plan brewing. It wasn't an explicit confession of the Henderson plan, but it clearly showed premeditated intent to manipulate through manufactured vulnerability. Then, the messages from Tuesday evening sent shortly after she'd arrived home and performed her initial breakdown for our parents. Olivia, phase 1 complete. Full meltdown deployed. They totally bought the Henderson story. Hook, line, and sinker. OMG, you actually did it? That's crazy. Is Henderson okay? Who cares? He's creepy anyway. Gave me a weird look once. Point is, Dad looked ready to kill him. Mission accomplished. Think the car is back on the table? Fingers crossed. Oh, this feels really wrong. What if someone finds out? Relax. No one got hurt. Except maybe Henderson's feelings, lol. Gotta do what you gotta do. He'll be fine. Old people forget stuff. My hands shook uncontrollably as I quickly photographed the screen with my phone, capturing multiple angles of these exchanges. This was the smoking gun. Premeditation. Clear initial motive. The car. Escalating into broader manipulation. Explicit confirmation of the fabrication. A chilling, dismissive lack of empathy for the innocent man she was targeting. It was all there. Stark and ugly. Armed now with concrete evidence, the verified alibi and the damning text messages, I knew approaching my parents was still utterly pointless. Their belief in Olivia wasn't rooted in facts or logic. It was an emotional allegiance, impervious to evidence that contradicted their preferred narrative of Olivia as victim and themselves as protectors. Involving the police directly still felt like too blunt and potentially uncontrollable an instrument, risking unintended consequences based on phone photos of private messages. The community board remained the most strategically sound avenue. My parents had already used the board structure to disseminate their version of events informally. I needed to use the same structure to provide the counter-information directly to the board leadership, specifically Mr. Davies, before they could be pressured into taking any formal action against Mr. Henderson based solely on Olivia's fabricated story. I arranged another private, discreet meeting with Mr. Bestad. Davies, the board president, again choosing the neutral, quiet ground of the town library. This time, I laid out all my evidence systematically. The verified alibi for Mr. Henderson, including Mrs. Gable's corroborating statement, which I confirmed she was willing to repeat if asked formally, and the photographic evidence of the library sign-out sheet. Then, I presented the clear photographs of the incriminating text messages between Olivia and Chloe, this time providing the full context and identities. I carefully explained Olivia's documented history of manipulative behavior, providing a couple of brief, verifiable examples from her past school interactions that illustrated the pattern. I highlighted the specific timing of the accusation in relation to the argument with my father about the car, and I described the behavioral inconsistencies I had personally observed since the alleged incident. Mr. Davies Davies reviewed all the materials meticulously, his expression growing increasingly grim and concerned as he absorbed the information. He compared the text message timestamps to the established timeline of the alleged incident. He reread Olivia's callous messages about Mr. Henderson multiple times. He finally looked up at me, his gaze direct and serious. This new evidence, he stated quietly but firmly, fundamentally changed the entire situation. It strongly, almost conclusively, suggested a deliberate and malicious fabrication. He commended my courage and sense of civic duty in bringing it forward, acknowledging the significant personal risk and difficult family situation I was navigating. He reiterated unequivocally that the board would take absolutely no action against Mr. Henderson based on the accusation. Furthermore, given the strength of the evidence I had provided, he felt obligated to speak privately and more forcefully with my father. He would not reveal me as the source, but he would strongly advise extreme caution, thorough verification, and perhaps a reconsideration of the facts as presented, before allowing unsubstantiated accusations to damage community relations, potentially ruin an individual's reputation, and expose the family to liability if the fabrication were proven. Mr. Davies's intervention behind the scenes seemed to have a subtle dampening effect. While my parents didn't suddenly recant or apologize, their overt public campaign against Mr. Henderson noticeably quieted. Dad, in particular, seemed more withdrawn when the topic arose, less overtly aggressive in his condemnations. However, the damage already inflicted within the neighborhood ecosystem persisted. Suspicion lingered like a bad smell. Some neighbors remained wary of Mr. Henderson, crossing the street to avoid him. He became visibly more reclusive, rarely seen outside his house or garden. Olivia, perhaps sensing the shift in official channels, or perhaps simply adapting her long-term strategy, skillfully transitioned her public persona from that of the terrified victim to the brave survivor enduring unfair scrutiny and doubt, continuing to garner sympathy and attention from a loyal segment of the community and within our extended family. The core lie, though effectively neutralized at the board level and doubted by key figures like Mr. Davies, hadn't been publicly retracted or exposed. It continued to fester. It became agonizingly clear that only a public refutation, a direct challenge to Olivia's narrative in an open forum, could truly clear Mr. Henderson's name and lance the boil of the lie that was poisoning our community. Chloe, Olivia's best friend and the recipient of the damning texts, was the only person who could deliver that blow with undeniable credibility. Her testimony, confirming Olivia had admitted the fabrication, would be irrefutable. Approaching Chloe again, this time to ask her to publicly betray her best friend, felt like walking through a minefield. Her loyalty to Olivia, however misplaced, was deeply ingrained, cemented by years of shared social history and mutual confidences. I intercepted her after a school club meeting, finding a moment when she was alone, packing her bag. I didn't waste time with pleasantries or small talk. I reminded her directly of the texts, of Mr. Henderson's proven innocence, of the ongoing, unjust damage Olivia's lie was causing, not just to him, but to the neighborhood's sense of trust. Chloe was immediately defensive, fearful, her eyes darting around nervously. Olivia would destroy her socially, she whispered, make her life a living hell if she spoke out. I acknowledged her legitimate fear, but pressed the point relentlessly. Her continued silence made her complicit in a serious false accusation. I showed her the text photos again, reminding her that this concrete evidence existed. What if someone else uncovered it? What if Mr. Davies, pushed too far, felt compelled to reveal what he knew to the wider board or community? Her association with the lie, documented in those texts, could have serious repercussions for her own reputation, potentially even legal ones, if Henderson decided to pursue action. The upcoming neighborhood meeting, the one ironically called under the pretext of discussing the safety issue Olivia had invented, was her one clear opportunity to control her own narrative, to come clean, to mitigate potential future damage, and ultimately to do the right thing. It was a stark choice, guaranteed social suicide versus potential complicity in a damaging, potentially actionable, false accusation. After a long, agonizing silence, during which she stared intently at the damning texts on my phone screen, she finally nodded almost imperceptibly, tears welling in her eyes. She would do it. But the fear radiating from her was palpable. She made me promise I would back her up somehow. The community clubhouse buzzed with an unusual, charged energy on the night of the designated meeting. It was packed far beyond typical attendance levels, neighbors drawn by the thinly veiled subject matter and the swirling rumors. My parents and Olivia occupied seats near the front, a carefully arranged tableau of embattled righteousness, Olivia projecting an aura of fragile resilience. Mr. Davies opened the meeting, his expression carefully neutral, attempting to maintain order. Following routine announcements, he invited discussion on community safety measures. Several residents spoke, referencing the recent incident indirectly, expressing anxieties fueled by Olivia's widely circulated story, suggesting improved lighting near the mailboxes or the formation of a neighborhood watch patrol. Then Mom stood. She delivered a stirring, highly emotional speech about the courage of victims, the importance of unwavering community support, the moral imperative to listen and believe, especially when young women felt threatened. Her performance was masterful, calibrated for maximum emotional impact, earning murmurs of agreement and sympathetic nods from many in the room. The atmosphere grew heavier, charged with righteous indignation directed implicitly at Mr. Henderson. Then Chloe stood up. A sudden, complete hush fell over the crowded room. All eyes swiveled towards her slight figure. Olivia's head snapped around, her eyes wide first with disbelief, then with dawning panic. Chloe made her way slowly, hesitantly, to the front of the room, her hands visibly trembling. She mumbled an apology for interrupting the flow of discussion. Then, looking down at her shaking hands, avoiding Olivia's increasingly frantic gaze, she began to speak. Her voice was low, cracking at first, barely audible over the sudden silence, but it gained volume and a strange clarity as she continued. She acknowledged her long-standing friendship with Olivia. Then she stated, clearly and unequivocally, that the story Olivia had told about being harassed by Mr. Henderson was not true. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Utter silence reigned for a split second, then erupted into an explosion of noise. Shocked whispers, angry exclamations, neighbors turning to each other, arguments erupting simultaneously across the room. Chloe forced herself to continue over the rising din, explaining quickly that Olivia had admitted to her it was an exaggeration, born of other frustrations, that Mr. Henderson had done nothing wrong, that he was innocent. Dad surged to his feet, his face purple with rage, shouting, pointing his finger at Chloe, accusing her of lying, of betraying her friend under duress, demanding she retract her statement. Mom rushed dramatically to Olivia's side, as Olivia, on cue, predictably collapsed into loud, convulsive, theatrical sobs, burying her face in Mom's shoulder, playing the part of the doubly betrayed victim. Neighbors started shouting at each other, some defending Chloe, others condemning her, still others demanding explanations from my parents. Mr. Davies banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order that refused to come, the meeting dissolving into chaos. Amidst the pandemonium, Chloe looked up briefly, her eyes finding mine across the crowded, noisy room. She looked terrified, utterly overwhelmed, but underneath the fear, there was a flicker of something else. A strange, exhausted calm. The burden of the secret, the weight of complicity, was finally lifted. She had done it. The lie was irrevocably public knowledge. The immediate aftermath of the meeting was chaotic, decisive, and brutal. My parents, shielding a hysterical and traumatized Olivia, pushed their way out of the clubhouse, refusing to acknowledge questions or angry shouts from neighbors demanding clarification. Chloe endured a barrage of vicious accusations and social media attacks from Olivia's loyalists, but also received quiet expressions of gratitude and support from others who had long harbored doubts or knew Mr. Henderson personally. The neighborhood was irrevocably split, the facade of suburban harmony shattered. Back home, the atmosphere was not just glacial, it was volcanic. The full force of my parents' fury, previously simmering beneath the surface, now boiled over, directed entirely and exclusively at me. I was accused, vehemently, of manipulating Chloe, of coercing her into lying, of masterminding the entire public humiliation out of spite and jealousy towards my sister. My attempts to center the conversation on the actual facts, Olivia's documented lie, Mr. Henderson's proven innocence, were utterly futile, dismissed as irrelevant distractions. The core transgression, the unforgivable sin in their eyes, was my profound disloyalty, my refusal to protect the family narrative, my choice to prioritize abstract truth over concrete familial allegiance. Olivia, recovering with remarkable speed, now that the immediate public spotlight was off, watched silently from the sidelines, allowing my parents to fight her battle, her expression a mixture of sullen resentment and calculating victimhood. My isolation within the family structure was now complete, absolute. Yet, even after Chloe's dramatic public confession had blown the lid off Olivia's primary lie, a crucial, nagging question lingered, unanswered, casting a shadow over the entire situation. The why, the initial trigger, the argument over the convertible, felt increasingly insufficient as a motive for such a high-risk, elaborate, and potentially life-ruining fabrication. Olivia's tenacity in clinging to the victim role, even when facing exposure from her closest friend, suggested a deeper, more powerful undercurrent of desperation. What was she truly afraid of? What secret was so significant, so potentially damaging to her carefully constructed world, that she would risk destroying an innocent man, alienating her best friend, and throwing her family into chaos to create such a massive diversionary smokescreen? The need to understand the root cause became paramount. It felt like the final, essential piece needed to comprehend the full scope of the dysfunction I was confronting, to understand the true nature of the manipulation that had held my family captive for so long. This level of inquiry, digging into potentially hidden aspects of Olivia's life, required resources and expertise far beyond my own capabilities. It necessitated professional help. The decision to hire Sarah Jenkins, the private investigator, felt like the ultimate transgression, yet a definitive crossing of the line into actively investigating my own family, inviting an outsider into our deepest secrets and dysfunctions. Yet the relentless drive to understand the fundamental why, to uncover the foundational motive behind the destructive Henderson accusation, overshadowed my considerable reservations and the accompanying guilt. I met Jenkins again in her discreet office, authorizing her to delve deeper, specifically tasking her with uncovering Olivia's underlying motive for the initial fabrication. I provided her with the timeline, the known facts, and the lingering questions, paying her fee from my rapidly dwindling savings. Jenkins' investigation over the following weeks was, as before, discreet but thorough. She employed a combination of techniques, focusing on Olivia's activities and communications in the weeks leading up to the Henderson accusation. She uncovered Olivia's clandestine relationship with the older, motorcycle-riding boy, someone Jenkins quickly confirmed had a minor juvenile record and was precisely the type of individual my image-conscious parents would vehemently disapprove of. Through meticulous recovery of deleted digital fragments, emails to another friend, not Chloe, remnants of online searches, fragments of text messages, Jenkins unearthed Olivia's escalating panic about a potential unplanned pregnancy resulting from this secret relationship. The timing aligned perfectly. The Henderson lie wasn't impulsive, nor was it solely about the car. It was a calculated, desperate, strategic move. Olivia, terrified of our parents' explosive reaction to to the potential pregnancy in her forbidden relationship, had preemptively manufactured a major crisis. She needed to cast herself as a vulnerable, traumatized victim, thereby securing their unwavering sympathy, protection, and emotional support before she might have to reveal her own potentially devastating secrets. She needed their focus externalized, their anger directed at a fabricated enemy, their protective instincts fully engaged. Mr. Henderson, the quiet, unassuming neighbor, was merely convenient collateral damage in her elaborate high-stakes game of preemptive emotional manipulation and control. The final, unavoidable confrontation unfolded on a quiet, rain-soaked Sunday afternoon. With Mark coincidentally home from college for the weekend, all the key players were present in the tense quiet of the living room. I didn't raise my voice or make accusations. I simply placed Jenkins's concise, factual report on the coffee table in the center of the room. The surveillance details confirming the secret meetings, the recovered messages explicitly detailing the pregnancy scare and the fear of parental reaction, the undeniable timeline establishing the connection and the motive. I stated calmly, my own voice trembling slightly despite my resolve, that this explained why Olivia had lied about Mr. Henderson. The silence that followed was profound, heavy, broken only by the rustle of pages as Mom picked up the report, her hands trembling as she read, her face slowly crumpling with dawning horror and disbelief. Dad stared blankly at the pages, his usual anger seemingly extinguished, replaced by a profound, weary understanding of the depth of the deception. Mark, reading alongside him, his usual detachment finally breaking, wore an expression of undisguised disgust directed squarely at Olivia. Olivia, cornered by irrefutable, documented facts, offered no defense this time, no denial. She simply crumpled, quiet, genuine tears of shame and fear finally replacing the earlier performative sobbing. She confirmed the pregnancy scare, which, in a final, tragic irony, was later revealed through a doctor's visit to be a false alarm, rendering the entire destructive episode utterly pointless. The ensuing conversation was low, fragmented, choked with pain and disbelief. Recriminations were exchanged, but the focus broadened beyond Olivia's specific lie to encompass the family's collective blindness, the years of enabling patterns, the ingrained prioritization of appearance, and preferred narratives over uncomfortable truths. Yet even in this moment of raw, unavoidable exposure, a significant portion of the blame inevitably settled back onto me. Mom questioned my methods with quiet anguish, hiring the private investigator, the spying on my own sister, bringing a stranger into their most private, painful secrets. Dad lamented the destruction wrought by the truth, his voice heavy with bitterness and exhaustion, implying that some truths were better left buried for the sake of peace, however illusory. My relentless pursuit of the facts, my refusal to stop until the absolute root cause was uncovered, was framed not as a necessary corrective action, but as the final, unforgivable act of familial betrayal. I had prioritized truth over loyalty, exposure over protection, and in their eyes that was the ultimate sin. The break was clean, absolute, and immediate. There were no further arguments, just a chilling finality. I moved out shortly thereafter, finding a small, cheap room to rent across town. Finishing my last year of high school felt like navigating a fog. Disconnected from the emotional wreckage I inhabited, my parents established a cold, formal distance, providing the legally required minimum financial support for college applications, but severing all personal communication, refusing calls, returning letters unopened. Mark, predictably, aligned himself completely with them, blocking my number. Olivia transferred schools mid-year, seeking the anonymity of a fresh start where her reputation wasn't irrevocably shredded. The family unit, as I had known it my entire life, effectively ceased to exist, shattered into irreparable pieces. Living with the consequences remains a solitary, ongoing burden. The guilt over my specific role in triggering the final implosion is undeniable, a constant hum beneath the surface of daily life. Perhaps there was another way, a less confrontational, less destructive path to resolution. Yet the alternative, allowing Olivia's calculated lie to fester indefinitely, allowing an innocent man to remain under a cloud of suspicion, perpetuating the toxic cycle of unquestioning belief and enabled manipulation within my family, felt equally, perhaps even more, untenable. My family's reflexive, deeply ingrained need to believe Olivia, their designated victim, regardless of mounting evidence to the contrary, created the fertile ground for the disaster. My refusal to participate in that collective fiction, my insistence on verifiable objective truth, ultimately cost me my family, my history, my sense of belonging. It left me utterly alone, adrift in the ruins. The question, should you always believe the victim, became painfully, irrevocably personal. My experience serves as a harsh testament that unquestioning belief, while often warranted and necessary, can also be weaponized, exploited by those who master the performance of victimhood. Sometimes, the hardest, most painful, and most isolating path is to question the narrative, to dig relentlessly for the truth, even when, especially when, that truth costs you everything you hold dear. I uncovered the truth, but lost my home, my past, my family. The question of whether the price was ultimately worth it remains stubbornly unanswered, a constant companion in the quiet solitude of my reconstructed life.